My name is Tony Morin. I've been a filmmaker, quote unquote, since about 2004. The first 2 years I don't really count because I was still learning. So I went to a school in Richmond, Virginia called VCU and didn't really find my path there. I was looking into psychology as a major. And I came to Wilmington simply to be at a beach town college. And I surf, and that's what brought me here. Then I met some really cool people that had just graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in film, and it seemed really cool and something attainable. So I found this amazing program at Cape Fear Community College, which had just started the semester before, and it was all hands-on. It was sort of what I call like a poor man's UNCSA, right? You still get like a lot of great instruction, and it was amazing, right? Dawson's Creek donated like 2 sets that we rebuilt inside of our college. We had a red camera right out of the gate, which was like brand spanking new. We had a tenured stage manager from Los Angeles who just decided to get out of the rat race and for whatever reason come to Wilmington, North Carolina and teach kids how to do this. That was just a gift, and he became a mentor of mine throughout my life and still is. And that really shaped my career because I started at the news as an intern. That was really lucky, right? That was not exactly what I wanted to do, but I got my hands on a camera. I got to understand like the fast-paced world of telling a story very fast and editing very fast. Like a lot of times I was the one responsible for cutting these stories in an hour with a reel-to-reel mixer in a van that was like ridiculously hot. And I would get in trouble for, not having a story on time as like a 21-year-old, which was a great experience. So I got an actual job at the other news station, and that lasted for about 2 years. And during that time, kept developing my skills and started filming surfing and music. Those were my 2 passions, right, at that point, and they still are. And that transitioned into paid gigs. I was really surprised. I was getting paid gigs to do multicam shoots, highlight reels, and with surfing, it was mostly like contests.
So the transition into these paid gigs, surfing, interest in, I guess you started to make a living doing these passion-related music and surfing videos.
I wouldn't call it a living, but I was making money, which was a miraculous thing. Because it's kind of like one of those things, like I hear like soccer players are like, you can make a living doing this? Like, that's amazing. And that's kind of how I felt, right? It's like people pay you to do these really fun things. That's like remarkable. So that transitioned into finding like on-set projects, right? So I started really enjoying camera work and became a first AC and did that for a few years and kind of realized that I wasn't the right personality for it. Right. Most first ACs really by the book, type A, and that's just not me. Right. I'm good with tech stuff. I can be like a tech head when I put my mind to it. But like the whole like sitting next to the camera operator and doing whatever they need to do or kind of being at call for their every single need is not my vibe. Like I didn't like that. I like having a little bit of flexibility. So that transitioned into being a first AD. So then I started doing firsting for 3 to 5 more years after that. And on an independent scale, I wasn't DGA yet. I became 3rd area DGA eligible with all my hours and time. But by that point, I was so burnt out on doing AD work that I, kind of transitioned into my own company at that point and then location management, right? So the way I've been able to balance my career is take 2 to 3 month gigs on episodic or feature-length projects and then use the other 9 months to work at this. And the reason I had to do that was I wasn't making quite enough money with my own company, right? But like 2 to 3 months would get me some 401k, my health insurance, and a steady enough paycheck to where I could save. And that seemed to be the ticket for me. And that's basically what I did until about 2013. And then that was our first real big dip in North Carolina film in terms of when I was working it. And that, as far as I remember, and as far as what I know, that was because of the HB2 law that we put into place, right? With the dumbest bathroom law that anyone's ever made. So they just pulled so many projects and then they all went to Georgia. It's like, oh yeah, that's a way less bigoted state than North Carolina. And, that was the beginning of me fending for myself and trying to find even more independent work. So it was a kind of a blessing in disguise in some ways because I stopped getting Screen Gems gigs and had to fend for myself and really make this thing make money. I think another big like pivotal moment, I mean, that went on for years and it really, I think my company peaked at its like musical career, and somewhere around 2016 to 2018. We were doing a lot of festivals, going to California once every other month to shoot music festivals, and really big ones too. It was really just a great time. But I think eventually, I think as a creative, it's really hard to just stay in that one space your entire life. I am admirable of people that can and just become absolute experts at it. But I get bored and I get burned out on the people and the vibe. And then you kind of uncover these things, right? It's kind of like not meeting your heroes. And you're like, oh, this is what this is. This is what this musician does on his off time or their off time. This is how the pudding is made. I don't think I want to be a part of that. So one of the transitions that I made was into, and this is probably how you know me, is documentary filmmaking, or at least mini docs around environmental causes. That started with the Surfrider Foundation. I'd done some surfing photography, videography, and they're like, hey, would you want to volunteer for this thing? And lo and behold, I did one gig and everything else was paid after that. It's kind of awesome. Really, really can't recommend Surfrider Foundation enough. And then some of those films that I made, mini films about, dune restoration with Christmas trees and stuff like that, got the eye of the Nature Conservancy and other typical, other nature nonprofit conglomerates, right? So that transitioned into work with them, and I just loved the niche. And I've met some really great people. Robin Wood is another person. His father, Andy Wood, is a champion of the green. Literally, he's like an OG environmentalist here in Wilmington, and I learned so much from those guys. Yeah. And we did a lot of really great environmental impact stories around wood pellets, around the Venus flytrap, around just our general ecosystems in the Southeast. And the last thing I want to say, because I want to talk about my career this whole time, but the pandemic, right? I'm sure everyone's got their own story. For us, we were really established at that point with events, right? So we had this really nice thing where we could afford to do a really amazing video that took like 2 weeks and we only got paid $1,500 for. Right now, that's not feasible. What made it possible was that we were doing really big events for like 7 days straight in Seattle or in Texas or in Boston. All that went away within a month, right? We had 90% of our clients that were not able to do their events because of the pandemic. So we lost tons and tons and tons of money. So that was the big reinvention point for us. How do we turn into a marketing company? How do we make money from home without just making real estate videos, which was my first alternative there. And, that's kind of where I've been since 2021. I got lucky enough to work with Mr. Beast for a couple of years, and he brought my bank account back up. I'm super thankful for that. And that's kind of crutched us along. We're still not in a great place comparatively to where we were in like 2019, I'll be honest. So our doc space is getting less and less because, as you know, most of the time that's at least self-funded for the first couple months or, first couple years or first 7 years, depending on who you are. So the marketing aspect of what we're doing has helped float us because we were able to run ads for people, because someone comes to us for content and they're like, hey, we need a video. It's like, great. Where's that video going? They have no idea. Why are we making this video? They have no idea. Who's your audience? We have no idea. So once you identify all those things, you kind of become a authority comparatively. They're like, oh, I just wanted a video, right? There's all these different ways to get it out there and get your video or your content into other people's hands. And that's kind of what we've been making money on, is like, hey, we'll run the ads for you. We'll do all these other pieces that go along with it, not just make you the video. So a more holistic approach to marketing. And yeah, I won't mention AI in this wrap, but we do some AI stuff too.
Listen, I appreciate you directly adding me with the whole self-finance a documentary for 7 years. I have funders, but yeah, the struggle is real. That was an excellent transition into give me a short bio and then tell me your whole professional life story. I took a lot of notes. I think that's really interesting. Cool. And I appreciate also, the sincerity with which you're actually sharing the pretty drastic transitions that you've had. And it's helpful too to like link it to these like major historical time points. Like, yeah, HB2 obviously was
a low point.
It was a nightmare. Yeah. Moving right along. So we're following the pathway of moving to North Carolina, connecting with folks who had gone through UNC's film program, which got you more interested in, it sounds like, both film and media. It seems like there was a time frame then you were working for the news, which gave you the understanding of how do you operate under constraints, also in the heat of a small van. This transitioning into making your fun side gig or your fun videos related to your two passions, which was surfing and music, And eventually those you made a little bit of money from. And then you're in Wilmington during the brief period where there was actually a nice film industry, spending, a quarter of the year working as an AD, and then using that financial stability to then float your company independently in the remaining 9 months, transition up to HB2, which took everything away, pivoting more into music is what I have noted. And then 2018, roughly, it looks like that was the Surfrider donation mini doc, which then turned into a lot more in the environmental doc telling space until the pandemic came around. You had been established doing event videos, doing these small projects, but then the pandemic screwed you guys up, to put it mildly, losing about 90% of your clients. Interesting mention of Mr. Beast, but then this transition into marketing, I think, makes a lot of sense. I do feel like in my 7 years of sort of running my own media company, I too have had to, just be mindful of how we pivot and how we adjust, and really be open to opportunities as they arise. Because I have spent pretty much all my time, working doc in some way, shape, or form, which I like a lot of aspects of, but it's true. The financial stability of it is far worse than I think most people realize who are not in it. I have started to balance more of a little bit of what you're describing. Like I do now, I have some clients who want to do consulting for doc projects. I try to be really equitable with that though, because like you said, like they're already struggling to pay for their projects. So to pay a consultant can be like an exorbitant additional fee. That's why I just had some clients reach out who have an environmental doc project. And I'm like, let me help you, and let me help you actually finance it too. Because I feel like that needs to happen. But I like this pivot. I've been thinking about this too, this transition into providing your expertise as a communicator as well, also as an entrepreneur, right? When someone approaches you, a client, to say, hey, we want a video, to offer them much more value in that. And I see that it's both smart for your business, but also you're actually offering them a lot more that they don't realize they need. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. I think it's super important to have ownership over your content on the back end, right? Because it's so poorly presented if you don't have a hand in it, from what I've found, 90% of the time, right? A great example, you get $10,000 to make a commercially produced 1 minute thing, right? 10,000 is not like a boat ton of money, but if you keep it slim, a couple crew, and you're editing it yourself, you can still make money on that. You spend 2 months editing, back and forthing, just over and over and over with the client. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's just a gem out of the box. We just had a great moment, or a couple great moments like that. Our past few videos have been very minimal changes from the client, which I love. Quick side note, I think when I was younger, I would send things in draft form a lot more. Like, I know I'm 4 days behind. I need to get them something. I don't think it's smart. I think it's smarter to just give another 2 to 4 days, be late, and get something as close as possible to what you want, because you're only going to give yourself a pain for having them have to go through and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Even if you preface it like, hey, don't pay attention to the color, don't pay attention to the audio, don't pay attention to these things. Those are the first 4 things they mention, right? It's like, oh, the color was really weird here, and the audio sounded terrible here. It's like, no shit. I just said that. So for me, watching like a CEO of a company, like sort of drunk post a link to our Dropbox video at 11 p.m. at night on like a Sunday. We posted the video and it didn't get any traction. Right. Well, first of all, I told you not to just give the Dropbox link to anybody, including putting it on the internet. You're supposed to download this, put it on something like Vimeo, YouTube, or Facebook. And, all of those have their own different nuances, right? You need to be able to like understand social media to put it on Facebook, and Vimeo's like descriptions and URLs. So that is really frustrating as a filmmaker to spend, even if you got paid for it aptly, maybe it was 30 grand instead of 10. It's still awful, because it's like you put your heart and soul into it, whether it's commercial, whether it's environmental, whatever it is, right? It's a chunk of your life. So for somebody to just foolishly, put it out there as incorrectly as it possibly could be, that's supposedly like, the highest level at their company, I don't like that. And I wanted to change that anyway. So one great byproduct of that is you get paid more money to handle the back end, and you post it correctly. You get it done correctly. You get it the way you wanted it to look. You get the right thumbnail on there. You tagged your friends who helped you for minimal dollars in crew. You know what I mean? Like all those things that come along with that. And I think we as content creators need to take more ownership. Maybe it's just a baked in cost, but for us, it was like, hey, we'll do this. Plus we're going to make your ads for you and we're going to run your ads for the next 3 months. And that turns into a retainer, which is something that has been really hard for me to hack, right? Some of my best friends who are in this industry have really, really nice retainers. And I'm always like, how? And it's very hard to get that, but it is like the way to keep sustainable for sure.
That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate and I welcome more just like random sort of professional input like that. This concept of, if you're going to send something that you already know, you're probably expecting a revision or two from the client. I think you're completely correct. Like, it's so funny because I'm like doc ref cut screenings, for instance. Well, one, I do feel like part of this is I feel like a perfectionist a lot with my work. If I'm going to show someone something, even if it's, 15%, 20% of the final, I'm still going to do a color pass. I'm still going to do some sound smoothing. I'm not going to spend way too long on it, but you're completely correct. People, audience members especially, which is going to be like most clients that you're working with, because they're not filmmakers themselves. Why would they be hiring you? They're going to be distracted by everything else. It's like, you can't say, oh, there's no color. Don't worry about that. I know there's no transitions. Audio is weird at some points. I do feel like there has to be a happy medium of like, no, get it to what people expect to see to a reasonable extent, and then they can focus on the actual content of it. I think that's just generally the case. Like, people who do not work in an art field, so filmmaking, they don't understand. They don't know how to see it in that rough form without just being like, why is everything washed out? Why is that loud and this isn't? I think that's just universally the case.
Good. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
So that's really...
Yeah, it saves...
You're not the... No, I mean...
It saves them too, right? It saves their time too.
Right, because then it also may harm your reputation. They may be like, oh, this person's an idiot. They're sending me like, this doesn't look right. This doesn't sound right.
And what happens every single time is that they take credit for the things that you changed after you did that. Well, I told them to change the color and the audio, and now it sounds amazing. It's like, no shit. Like, did you read the first email? Wow. The very first thing I said in big bold letters was the color correction and the audio correction are not complete. But yeah, you clearly made this what it is right now. So yeah, there's a fundamental law of people here that I learned when I was a professional sign maker at Whole Foods, which is that people can't read, and so that's the problem. So okay, I want to make sure we hit some of the main points, because some of our guests, we go all over the place, but we want some continuity here. And so you've already kind of walked us through a lot of like what the professional work you're currently doing looks like. Can you, honestly, you've hit a lot of these things in your original sort of monologue flow, which is great, making my job easier. Can you discuss another like major challenge or failure? I mean, I could extrapolate from your like, the pandemic came, and like, obviously the failure is that you didn't predict that there was going to be a pandemic. Like, come on. But no, I would love another example maybe of like, what's a real like sticking point, something that happened earlier, mid, or recently in your career that you're like, don't do this. This was really important for me to learn. I mean,
and it can be one or multiple.
Yeah. Sometimes I think what comes to me is you never know who you're talking to, right? Especially on a big set. And this is more for like big set life in some cases, I'd say. Like, and when I say that, it's like, 100 to 300 person sets that would generally be at Screen Gems or Warner Brothers. I kind of went off the hinge on a few people that ended up being like the daughter of the producer or the actual producer. And I was working on a movie called Bolden, which was kind of a great film with Anthony Mackie that he got snubbed from. It's a crazy story, but this guy would come in. I was managing the dancers, right? So I was a PA. This is about 2008, 2009. And all the dancers were top notch. It basically, like, half of them, I'm assuming, like, were in Hamilton. They're all just like Broadway. They came off of Austin Powers 2, and they were going to some other massive dance piece after this one. They were all just amazing. 3 months, I basically was their go-to person, just managing them back and forth, making sure they had everything they needed. Hinton Battle, who is a legendary Tony Award-winning choreographer from Broadway, was their lead. And this guy would come in every once in a while and just shoot the shit with me, and he would just kind of ask me, what was going on. And he just wore normal clothes. And it turned out he was the executive producer of the show. And I didn't know for the first 3 months. So I came so close to saying some really incriminating things that I'm glad it didn't. Right. So I guess part A would be you never know who you're talking to, and treat every PA like they're going to be your boss someday, because half of them probably will be. And also, I mean, you want to treat people like you want to be treated, of course, too. But in the heat of the moment, sometimes our egos and the speediness of our comments get in the way. You know, we say things in haste and then we regret them later. If I could keep a cooler head when I was younger, I probably would have tried to, for sure, because I definitely got canned from a couple jobs. I actually got fired from a few jobs. Little Britain was one of them. Those guys kind of sucked anyway. You know, it is what it is, and you learn from those mistakes and you don't do it again. I think, okay, this is a good one. I think just like overcommitting the workflow, or the workload, excuse me. You know, we see a big number and we get excited, right? I'm like, hey, I got $18,000 and I want you to do this thing. Like most people who need the money will do it, right? And it's a lot of times you break it down and you're like, dang, I got paid like $20 an hour at the end of the day for that. That sucks, right? Being more honest with myself and honest with the client. And it's really hard because even now, you know, we're in the middle of this animation that they basically bid on a South Park style animation from us, which we've done before. Mm-hmm. You know, we've subbed some of that out. Mm-hmm. We have programs that we can create those things in. It's just explainer video, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. New tech comes out and all of a sudden we're able to make like Pixar style, right? It's like, whoa, this looks amazing. We're going to do this. Yeah. It's cool because we're upping our level, and the next time we do this, we'll be able to say, this is what we made. However, we're like probably 30 hours longer than we should be already, and we still have another 30 hours to go. So one of my most challenging things is foreseeing how much time we're going to spend versus how much money we're getting. And, you know, protecting that time too. I know a lot of industries will say, okay, this is what we're going to quote, but you know, anything after this is out of scope, right? So that's one thing I'm learning to do. But if I could give, you know, advice on mistakes that I've made, try not to overcommit to too much content if you aren't in love with it, right? Like if something you're in love with, just freaking go for it, right? If you think you're going to enjoy it, you're not going to feel the time. But if it's just a thing that you're doing for money, give yourself some protection, give yourself some back end protection where you're like, hey, I'm going to do 50 hours on this, and anything after that is going to be $20 an hour, let's say. You know, it doesn't have to be crazy, but just enough to cover yourself. And then you give your client a heads up and you say, hey, listen, I'm at that 50-hour mark. These are all the next things you wanted me to do. And it's so much easier. Oh my God, it's so much easier when you have that stuff already in place. And that comes with onboarding. That's something that I learned that's huge from marketing. And yeah, I remember I've taken, over the past couple of years, I've dropped a ton of money on marketing coaching, and it was worth every single penny and then some. I can't remember. Wow. Yeah, this guy, Cinna Marketing Cheat Codes. It sounds like a ripoff, but the guy is an absolute genius. His name is Koishik Ahmad, and he's a really accomplished marketeer. And I remember in class one day writing down, onboarding is more important than the sale. And I never thought that in my life, but like, yes, dropping the sale is crucial. Getting them to say yes is crucial, but onboarding and expectations are more important than actually getting the yes. And now I have a 30-minute meeting with a doc that's pre-prepared where we talk about how you and I are going to talk. Like, I don't talk to my clients on my phone anymore. I talk to them in Slack or email, right? If they call me, I ignore it, period. Like, I don't want to mess with that. This is my personal phone. I have my own personal life. I turn it off, and it's on Do Not Disturb most of my maker hours, which are the times that I work on stuff when I'm making deliverables. And then I have meeting hours, right? I stole that from Alex Hermosi, who's also in the marketing world. Mm-hmm. And it's important to create boundaries, especially when you have family or loved ones that don't want to be involved in your work. Right? If you have a partner that doesn't want to hear about your day as a cop all day, you know, they're like, hey, let's not talk about murders tonight at dinner. You have to be able to set those boundaries for your clients too, you know? And I've come really close to losing a few, even recently. Be like, hey, you can't text me at 9 p.m. I'm sorry. This is why we have Slack, because not only can I, and it doesn't have to be Slack, it can be Teams, it can be any kind of communication device. The reason I love those platforms is not only does it separate your work and your life, but it also makes those things at work so much more searchable. Because if they're hitting you up on email and they're hitting you up on DMs and they're hitting you up on your phone with texts, those are 3 different places you have to look for something like branding guide, for instance, right? And if I type in branding guide in my email, there's 150 different occasions of that in the last year, because there's always a branding guide coming through for marketing, right? From a different company.
Yeah.
If I go to our Slack channel and type it in, it's going to come in right away. So sorry to go tangent on that, but I think that that's super important to me.
So that was great. So we transitioned into, essentially more professional advice, which is like to divide work and like your home life.
Yeah. The question was, what makes for a great story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
No risk, period, no story. And I think that to me is it. When I've made stories that don't have any risk or any opinion involved, they're so boring. And there's nothing there for people. Now, when you put an opinion on something, then you're going to lose fans, you're going to lose followers, you're going to lose your audience to some degree, but you're going to make the connection with your other audience much, much stronger. So, to me, you ask what makes a great story. Putting risk out there and making sure that you're staying true to yourself, but you're also being reasonable. I've had my first experience with a big doc, in my opinion, was a great experience. I'll never change a thing about it. But the piece that I put together was basically like a 45-minute lookbook. It didn't really have direction. It didn't even have like a definitive storyline. And that was not purposeful. In my head, I thought it was like cohesive and it was going straight to Sundance or South by Southwest, But then watching it back with an audience in the famous Bird Theater in Richmond, Virginia, which I can't recommend enough. It's from the 1920s. It's got an old Hurlitzer organ, on hydraulics that comes out of the ground, and they play Phantom of the Opera every Saturday night. It's got all the original seating and stuff. It's just a peach of a place. I had about 400 of my closest friends come to my screening, and I couldn't get far enough back into my seat when I was watching it. It was just like, can I just sink into this thing and disappear and then come back next year? Because this sucks, right? And it had a lot to do with the audio. And then the big gaps that were there that I didn't kind of feel when I was watching it on a monitor, right? So any filmmaker out there who's going to have a screening, do yourself a favor, rent out a screen place, make a deal with somebody, tell them you're going to clean the popcorn machine if you can just watch your film for an hour. And make sure that it's not going to just embarrass the heck out of you when you're watching it.
So the element of a great story or professional advice here? Because I heard technical issues were really what drew you to be like, oh, damn, in reflecting on your own piece. But then the thread that got us here was was it essentially conflict or like something, you need a hook, right? That's risky. You need a risky hook to pull people in. If it doesn't have that, why are you watching?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, risk has something to do with it. I think risk is maybe the overlying theme, right? And this definitely wasn't risky. And there were technical aspects that weren't good, right? The audio wasn't good, like I mentioned, but I think the biggest overlying factor and underlying factor would be that the story was not cohesive. It didn't have flow, and it was only obvious to the people that went on the trip. This was like me following a bluegrass band in Oregon for like 2 weeks, right? And there was lots of symbolism within it, but it's kind of like if you're not a hardcore Fish fan, you're not going to get references that Trey says, on stage. You're just going to be like, okay, I don't get this. This sucks, right? And it kind of feels like that, when I watch that back. It makes sense to me, but I sympathize with the audience that they didn't really get it. And it's so hard though, because, you look at people like Rick Rubin, right? He's just like, don't compromise your story. Don't change anything. Don't do this. And it's like, if you're a savant and you're amazing, great, but everyone else, the other like 99% of us actually have to think about the people that we're telling the story to. And I don't mean change your story based on that. Like, I don't think you should change your story based on your audience, but you should structure it based on your audience so that they're going to be able to ingest it. Right? Does that make sense?
That was great. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's the type of thing that it feels like when I'm offering advice in doc, it's 100% about who is this for? What is it going to give them? Like, is it to push something? I mean, I feel like so many docs are about like creating some sort of like change within society, right? Because if the idea is like, I want to spread awareness for what, to what end, right? And in that way, I think I've learned the same thing of like, you make something, you think it makes perfect sense, and you're like, oh wait, actually this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because when we're spending a lot of time on a story, or if we ourselves are involved as a director, like we're physically there, we have this closeness, right? This proximity to the content that fills in all the gaps that somebody else doesn't have. My favorite thing about creating documentary projects is like, in terms of making it good and making it actually like a story that stands alone, is getting feedback from people just who have no connection at all. Like, I actually love random feedback. I think that like rough cut screenings are the most important thing to become good at anything, because even just feeling like maybe the awkwardness of sitting next to someone who's like, what the fuck? What is that? You start to be like, oh, maybe this doesn't actually make a lot of sense how we just got here,
Or nobody laughs at the part that you think is just gut-bustingly hilarious.
Nobody laughs at the part.
And then they
oh
laugh
my
at
God,
the
we did a
things that
rough
aren't.
cut screening in December where everybody laughed. We got one of those recently. Sorry, we didn't get the awkward one. They laugh at that did happen a few times where they laughed at things that I was like, didn't expect that. But I think you've made it when your story has an intentional punchline and you're in the room and you're like, oh, thank you for validating that. Yeah. Even if it's just one person in the room, it's like, you get it.
Right. It's like when you're learning to tell jokes
really
and you're like, you try it out amongst friends and they all just stare at you and you're like, oh God, that one didn't hit.
But I'm curious for you, one of the ways that I'm looking to expand and change a little bit, because I have a small team now. We have space. We have good gear. To an extent, I'm interested in saying, okay, when my crew is not busy working on a project, how can we make some extra dollars here and there by just like making local folks aware that like, hey, you could be our clients. We could actually be doing, especially if it's benefiting from my experience in documentary, short form, like explainer splash videos for businesses who have perhaps a scientifically complex thing that they offer. Like that's sort of our niche. Like that's where all my awards for filmmaking are based in like science communication. And so I'm trying to just stick to my niche, which is that. So I would rather than me abstractly being like, what advice would you offer? Like, no, Tony, like walk me through it. Like I don't do a lot of client work, but I've never done advertising. We just, like I said, experimented with a few days of ads, saw nothing as a result of it, and then ironically shut down the ads. And 2 days later, people that I know, of course, because this is how it happens, word of mouth, I had 2 different folks like reach out to me to be like, hey, can I hire you as a consultant? Hey, can you work on a project for us? So what would you say for how a little doc shop here in the Triangle should go about if we want to bring in some clients, make some short form videos, offer communications advice, similar to what you're doing, but not predatory, hopefully, because we're in different parts of the state. What would you recommend?
That's a great question. First off, I'll say some of my best clients are ones that saw our content, connected with it, and reached out to us after that with zero advertising whatsoever. Our frequency of posting content has like diminished, and our word of mouth content has also diminished with it. Our word of mouth clients. Right. That's my own doing, right? I think there's different seasons in life, and right now I'm in a season where things are changing, right? And like I have 2 children that depend on me and a partner, and these 2 offices like you do, and I had to get real, right? Because I can't keep day to day, week to week paychecking. Right. I need sustainability.
Yeah.
So the more content that you create that's great, the more people are going to reach out to you in that way. And I do strongly feel that that's the best. Now, unfortunately, in most niches, I think word of mouth marketing is dying. Right. And whether it's we're less connected with each other, we're on our phones more. That's what it is. Right. We're just on our phones 90% of the day instead of talking to people for 90% of the day, right? We've flip-flopped that. So then our word of mouth now becomes what we're seeing, right? So making like 2 bangers of things that you really love in your area. So maybe even if it's just like a spec thing, right? That you're going to crush, and then making sure that back end is like the negotiation point. Like, hey, I'm going to make this for you, but I'm going to do everything on the back end. This is how we're going to post it. I'm going to post it for you on your account, and I'm going to tag us, and we're going to make it a collaborative post. And we're also going to tag your other sponsors and make them be collaborators too. So all those people see it, right? I think that you have really good negotiation leverage when you're doing something for free or next to nothing, right? So I'm like a demander when those things happen. Well, in most cases, right? So if it's like an environmental project or something that is causeworthy, right? Like it's not just environmental stuff we do. We worked for Welcome Home Angel for a couple of years, which is bringing like renovations to underprivileged kids who have debilitating health issues, right? That was like a really awesome causeworthy project that we did. But like if we're going to do stuff that's like $500 that should be $5,000 just because it's a favor for somebody, I'm going to take a lot more ownership over that and put some serious ground rules down. And in that case too, this is another little quick tip. If you're doing a $500 project for $5,000 project for $5,000, you still invoice for the $5,000 and make it very hard to find the $500. And the reason you do that is because you need them to almost shit your pants a bit because they're like, oh crap, did I screw this up? And then they finally see the $500 at the bottom. They go, okay, but it sets the tone that this was a $5,000 piece and I'm giving you a massive hookup. So don't tell your friends that this was a $500 piece. This is a $5,000 piece. And that's another thing, right? Is like, you need to be clear with your clients. If you are giving them like a deep discount, that like, this will never happen again for you or anybody. So this was just something to like get us in this field. So, and the cool thing about having people on your team, like it doesn't have to be the same medium that you think you're the best at. Right? Like maybe they're just going out with phones and making a really awesome UGC piece that took them an hour, right? And that somehow becomes your niche. And, at least niche at that level while you're supporting your larger form documentary stuff. So, you might be the go-to people that like bring the phone gimbal out and do like, an hour of shooting once a month and create some really cool updates for these scientific, companies, whether it's pharma, whether it's like something, in chemical that isn't like harming the environment. I don't know exactly, I don't know who that is necessarily. Don't work for Chemours.
On a related note, actually, to build from this thread, do you have experience or opinions about like cold contacting potential clients? Do you ever do that?
Yes. To me, it's the worst way to get a client. And that stinks.
Makes sense.
It really stinks because you identify these people or conglomerates that are like perfect for you. Oh my God, they'd be perfect for us. Right. And and if you create something compelling enough, they may get back to you, but it's so hard and you have to kind of do it backwards to where you're like, this is me over here. Are you looking? And they didn't see it. And then this time it's like, hey, this is still us, right? You're creating content, you're putting it out there. You're tagging them, right? Like sometimes the best like cold calling I've done in this modern world is like adding someone like at set. Is that what you call it? AT.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe they collaborate or maybe they at least DM you. That was really cool, right? Like Mananalu Water was a good example. We did some stuff for them really early on. Jason, what's his name? Momoa. I added them before they were anybody. And I'm like, hey, let me just shoot some cool content. We have the studio. I really believe in your project. I didn't even know Momoa was involved. He may not have been at that point. It was more just like, you guys are making, aluminum that, and say what you will about it. I mean, it still sucks, right? Like it's still a disposable bottle, but it's better, right? It's somebody moving in the correct direction. It supports nonprofits in Hawaii, like all these things that I wanted. So I just shot him a DM. That was a cold call that actually worked. But I mean, just like you get probably a lot of cold calls from people trying to work with you, right? Emails like that. And I used to respond to them a lot more than I do, but they're so frequent now that I'm just like, not for me, sorry. And part of that is understanding marketing and understanding that, you can pinpoint their area and pinpoint them even and advertise to them directly without like you sending them an unwanted email or an unwanted call. There is another like 20% of the time where they're like, we've been waiting for someone to come talk to us about this. We've been wanting to make a video for so long. Like I'm so glad you called. When you get those, it almost feels like that cold calling is worth it, but it is rare compared to either word of mouth or paid advertising that converts into clients.
there's a psychology to this that I see, because again, the vast majority of our income, or like my income, and how I sustain the business, has come from doing fundraising, either through a foundation or an individual. I have a million times, like, it's just set. It's like a gold standard. If you are going to like meet somebody, like if that's someone who's going to fund you or work on a project or support you, provide some kind of resources, it is a million times better in every circumstance that somebody else is introducing you, that somebody else, even if it's you saying that so-and-so sent you, because I don't know what it is about human psychology of us, like we question a total stranger. Makes sense. And it fully changes the dynamic. Even if it's just like asking your friend to do the outreach and connect you to, there is something, but it's the same about like celebrating your own successes yourself versus somebody else celebrating your successes. One version is way more palatable. It's a little bit like, is this egotistical? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think the dynamic of the relationship, right, if you're cold calling, is it can easily come across as desperate.
I have a great recent example, and we actually talked about this during the pre-podcast session. I have a person who's a state representative I won't name, but I was trying to reach out to them for like 3 months. I have so many connections with them, right? It's like we have friends, mutual friends that go way back. They've seen my work. I've worked with their husband in the film industry for a long time. Could not get a hold of them at all. Like 3 months, just boom, 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 boom. And then I used my mentor that I brought up in the very beginning of this. I can say his name, Duke Fire. He's the Cape Fear Community College head of film. I was like, hey, you know this person. I've been trying to reach them for a long time. And within a day of him reaching out, she got a hold of me. So, it is the vouch. And it's, I don't know, maybe the labyrinth is even more complex now, because like everyone's so reachable that not only do you need to know this person and they need to know of you, but you need another voucher as well. So yes, you nailed that so hard. I think that having some champion of you is a critical part of kind of the cold reach out.
I think professional success requires champions. I actually think, for like the most universal advice from my career and my path that I've learned, is like, if you want to excel, if you want to succeed, if you want to accomplish things that are like truly noteworthy, it always requires that you have somebody who is your cheerleader, who is your voucher, who is willing to speak up for you, because we can only advocate for ourselves so much, and there's a finite limit, right? It's just that, it's exactly that example you gave. It's like the way that I got Mark Ruffalo as a producer. It required actually a lot of vouchers. It was a lot of no's, and it wasn't until I had that direct voucher of someone who could make that conversation actually happen and be like, no, this is worthwhile. It's the only way to cut through the noise. Final question for the podcast.
Okay.
What gives you hope for the future?
The next generation, by far. Watching them tell stories in their own way, watching how they communicate those stories, watching the new medium. People are scared of it, and it's sort of run part of us out of business in a way. But that's life, right? I did the exact same thing to the people that were coming before me, right? Like I undercut them with better video content and better storytelling. And now the same thing's happening to me, but it's happening, right? And I think that there's just so many exciting things with the ways we can tell stories and how accessible it is, and how you can make an entire documentary film on your phone now and edit it on your phone now. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can, right? And somebody in Africa who can only get those things can still make a worthwhile documentary and get into Cannes or South by Southwest or something like that. And that's just amazing, because that did not happen 15 years ago. That was impossible. So there's a lot of things that don't give me hope for the future, Elijah, but that's one of them that does. Thank you so much for having me on.
Beautifully said, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.